Hi, everyone. I am in DC right now, and we have three great candidates on today. And I'm just going to start out with a little clip. Just play a couple minutes. Actually, it's not a set clip, but this is from the Eisenhower Media Network's event today at the National Press Club. And this part, I believe, is where Ray McGovern is introducing Bryce Lockwood, who was one of the survivors on the USS Liberty. It was really great to meet him and a bunch of other people that were there. So I encourage you, go watch this, or some of it. It went on for 5.5 hours. But okay, so here we go.
As old sergeant uniform. That was the 50th anniversary of the June 8th, 1967 event. There are three survivors and me. Just to show you what the USS Liberty looked like after the attack, maybe we have the next and last slide. "34 U.S. sailors and Marines killed, 173, 4, 5, 170 plus people badly injured. And worst of all, as old Sarge will tell you, not only the U.S. Navy covered it up under instructions from the Pentagon, but the President of the United States and Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, covered it up as well. So there's been no justice done to these survivors. And like me, these survivors are getting older in age. But today, I'm delighted to introduce to you Old Sarge Bryce Lockwood, head of the Marine Detachment on the USS Liberty.
Little background. Early 1960s, several sub-Saharan African countries had recently won their independence from Spain, Portugal, Belgium, Germany, Great Britain. There was a heavy influence by both the Soviet Union and Cubans in sub-Saharan Africa, primarily due to the wealth of natural materials, gold, silver, rare metals.
Okay, well, since I don't have a set clip because it just happened today. I'll try to get some more clips prepared for next time, but really go and check it out. It's got Anthony Aguilar, Josie Gilbo, Brian McGinnis, who had his arm broken recently, and Dennis Fritz, who wrote Deadly Betrayal. So yeah, go check it out. It really was a great event. But let's get right into it. Oops, hold on a second. I think sorry, Michael. Okay. I'm doing this on the fly here.
You're doing good. You're doing good. Sorry.
That's okay. All right. So why don't I'll toss it to you then, Michael or Phil, and you can introduce.
All right.
And Diane will be here shortly.
Okay, great. I guess I'll go first. Nice to meet you, Loren, and Todd again. Thanks for coming back. I was an independent candidate in 2024 and plan to run again in 2028 with my whole message being anybody can run for Congress. You know, for too long, the rich, the powerful have taken our power from us, and it's time to get back. People need to get up off the sidelines. So I ran like a very grassroots campaign full of activism and on the ground support, mutual aid, and kind of redefining what it means to kind of run as far as being an activist. And so I'll throw it over to Phil. We're happy to have you guys here. You know, I'm super happy to have independents and third parties here because we got to shake this thing up. You know, we know this ship is sailing, but I'll head it over to Phil and then we'll do some introductions.
Thanks, Michael. Welcome, Todd and Loren. My name is Phil Anderson. I've been involved in libertarian politics at various levels nationally and statewide in Wisconsin for a long time. And I've also run for office 5 times, 3 times statewide, twice state assembly. So as we've had, I forget how many times we've done this cycle, Kelly, maybe 8? Are we on 8 or 9, 7?
Yeah, I've lost. I think this is 8. I think this is 8.
My role has become one of somebody that pokes holes in your dreams and aspirations. Not really, but I've got some experience to lend to. So that was my goal in participating in this, and the other things that I do. I've got a political action committee that we're firing up called Disrupt the Corruption, which was my campaign theme in 2024. The goal being so that people that are volunteering to run as third-party candidates and independents aren't making the same mistakes that previous candidates have made, simply because they're not connected. So we're trying to connect people, share messages, not reinvent the wheel every time somebody runs, and in that way, over election cycles, increase our impact and eventually get candidates like Todd and Loren and Michael when he runs in 2028, and I'll probably run again at some point too, get us all elected, and so that we can make a difference. So welcome, and back to you, Michael.
Cool. All right, so let's do some introductions. Let's go with Loren out there in California, running as an independent candidate. So tell us a little bit about what you're running on, who's in your race, and how things are going.
A pleasure to meet all of you. My name is Loren Colin.
Oh, sorry.
I am the first. That's all good. I'm the first no party preference independent candidate to ever be on the ballot for the primary in California 34. So we've already made some history as a no party preference independent. I'm running against Jimmy Gomez, who's a Democrat. He's been serving for 9 years. He calls himself a progressive, but he, has voted for the $1 trillion war authorization or military budget. He voted for ICE funding multiple times, DHS funding. He took $56,000 and suddenly he voted yes on the Genius Act, even though crypto has nothing to do with anybody in our district, and it just allows the president to secretly take his bribes. So he's all talk, but when it comes to actual progressive action, he doesn't do anything. We also have a problem here in California where we're a donor state. We send, not only are we the 4th largest economy and the engine that drives the whole rest of the country economically, but we actually support most of the country through our $267 billion worth of donations that we don't get back from the federal government. And part of why I'm running is to make sure to do the work that the California delegation of 40 Democrats and 12 Republicans doesn't do, because the two-party system is corrupt. They brag about how little money they return to the people of California. I'm running to make sure that all of the money the people of California send to the federal government comes back so that we can fix our streets and fix our infrastructure and invest in our people and our education. So that's why I'm running. I've been an independent my whole life, and I can tell you more as we go on.
Really? Wow. Your whole life. So
for 30 years.
Some high-speed rail would be nice.
Yes, it's coming. It's coming. So I've been an independent, Kelly, since 1996.
Wow. That's impressive.
So, thank you. So I turned 18 in 1994. So I'd already missed the 92 presidential election. But that very first time I registered the end of high school, I did register as a Democrat in Southern Orange County, which was pretty odd even back then. But I understood then, within years of the first term of Clinton, that the Democratic Party was not the party of FDR, and that the third way in Bill Clinton was actually Republican light. And what Bill Clinton did, and I was watching in real time, was he took the Reagan Revolution and he cemented it as the politics that we still have today, 45 years on from Reagan. He did it when he got rid of Glass-Steagall. Clinton did it when he passed, the toughest crime bill ever and continued to fill our prisons with black men and brown men. He did it when he, instead of increasing our, I don't want to call it our public funding and our public goods and services, he shrunk them and made welfare a dirty word instead of increasing funding for the public good. And then in 1996, when I finally moved permanently from Orange County to LA and it was time to re-register, that was when, after 2 years of Newt Gingrich being speaker, it was basically the last time there was actually an immigration debate, was in 1996. That was the last true immigration bill to pass. And I watched then the Republican Party dehumanize my neighbors and my friends that I had growing up here in Southern California. And I watched the Democratic Party just turn over, roll over, and join the dehumanization and not stand up and fight. And that was it for me. I understood 30 years ago that the Democratic Party would never be a party of the people. And so I've been an independent ever since. That doesn't mean I haven't voted because of our two-party system. I'm sure 98% of my votes have been for a Democratic candidate if I chose to vote in that election. But that's the problem with the two-party system, right? And that's why I'm running right now, is
That's
to
right.
be an option for the people in California 34 to break that system.
Well, if I were at home, I would lean over to my bookcase and grab Thomas Frank's Listen Liberal, a signed copy, by the way. But no, I mean, he spells it out exactly what the Clintons did. Oh, great. Diane is here.
And it's the same. That's one of anyone who's running for office as an independent or third party candidate. That's one of the major goals, right? Is to show progressives or libertarians or conservatives or whatever that their parties are just that they've been voting for are just the same and just for increasing government and increasing corruption and loyalty to their donors and not to the people whom they're supposed to be representing. And it's a very difficult psychological problem because people don't want to admit they've been fooled. They don't want to admit they're wrong. And because so many people that vote don't pay that close of attention and they believe what their politicians tell them. Yes, I'm a progressive. Well, okay. Well, I should vote for the progressive. Well, it's not true. So providing information and then prying them away from their emotional identifying heroes or whatever, how they identify themselves and therefore that projects onto the they vote for. That is a tall task, but that's what we're called to do.
Yes, it is. Certainly. Okay.
Absolutely.
Todd.
Yep.
Ready for me?
You're supposed to say something, Todd.
We didn't mention.
You're on the big screen.
Is Diane getting pulled over? What? You all right there? I'm Todd Schaefer. I'm running in Florida's 4th congressional district, which is the far northeast corner of Florida. It is a Republican plus 15 district. I wish, Loren, I had 30 years behind me of knowing that both parties are trash. Unfortunately, I fell into because I grew up in a union town. So my family voted split ticket. It used to be the thing, you voted split ticket. Like specifically when Reagan ran in the 84 election, I remember my parents having conversations about they wanted to give Reagan power in the White House, but they voted for Democrats down ballot because they wanted to constrain that power, right? So people used to have those conversations, but that just doesn't happen anymore. A big part of that was, like you said, exactly that. Bill Clinton deciding in the 90s to make the New Democrats to say, hey, we've got a new system now, and we're going to take your money to We're for Sale too, and we will do the bidding of the banks and big business exactly like the Republicans did. And one thing you didn't mention that he did is he signed NAFTA into law. It passed right before he took office, but he signed it into law. And that was like Reagan's wettest dream, excuse my language, but that was the final thing that had to be done to get Reagan's full vision of tearing apart the middle class in this country. And he signed it into law. Like I said, I wish I had recognized it when it was happening, but I was still young and dumb back then. So
You were also in the military. You're a veteran.
yeah, I'm retired Navy. I joined the Navy in 1998. So I joined not because of 9/11 or anything like that. I joined because I had a true sense of service to this country. I thought that the military was protecting this country, and I fell into the bubble of what the military provides, which if anyone hasn't ever spoken to someone in the military or tried to understand exactly how it works, the military is socialism. Right. So you have your housing paid for, your food is paid for. If you need to go to the doctor, you go to the doctor. If your kids need to go to the doctor, they go to the doctor. If they need to go to the dentist, it's all taken care of. Everything's taken care of. So they put you into this bubble, they move you hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from your family, and you don't realize how the rest of the country is getting on, and you just think this is the way things are. And then when you get out of it, you either go one of two ways. You either say, I'm retired now and I've got mine and I served my country so I deserve it, or you see that we haven't done anything for this country. So what was I serving and protecting if we've let the rest of the country fall to trash? So I got out, and it was a stark reality to start dealing with normal people who are outside of the military bubble and realizing that my 21 years in the Navy did nothing. It protected nothing. And we still have the same fights that we had 100 years ago when Teddy Roosevelt ran as an independent. And his platform, if you put that on a platform today, the progressives would be fighting for that. But that's stuff that we made steps forward and we've made a dozen steps back from. So that's a 100-year-old policy platform that we haven't even gotten yet. Anyway, so
You
that's
make a
why I'm
really
running.
good point about your service too. I think I served a long time ago, back when West Germany was West Germany, that long ago. But my sense is that, you know, there's all this hero worship that goes on in society, right? Our teachers, our soldiers, our police, nurses, and while those are all very difficult jobs, and I've done a couple of them, I think that the duopoly wants to make heroes out of those so they can cover to use those people to do things, whether they're you know, covering for, you know, COVID vaccinations that shouldn't have been railroaded and been unaccountable for lawsuits, or whether it's indoctrination in public schools, or being overseas killing people or whatever, that the cover is being a hero, right? So I think what you're saying, Todd, is you can live in that bubble, but once you see outside of it, once you know, quit your profession and do something else, or just your eyes are open in some way, shape, or form, there's a lot of mental stress and illness that comes with that too, which is why we have so many mentally disabled vets, because once they see what they've done and participated in, I can't imagine how hard that is to live with, and that's why we have so many sick vets.
And we still lose 22 a day to suicide.
Yeah, I think it's down to 17 though. I put that number out
That's
like last
still
year.
17
I
too
know it's
many.
still way too many, but I got corrected by veterans on that number, by Veterans for Peace. They're like, "Oh, it's only 17." Okay, 17 too many,
Well,
obviously. You know, if
let's
people
bring,
if you don't have your facts right, then people like to nitpick, and then they try to throw out your whole point. So.
Right. It's a tactic. Well, let's bring Diane in, and I will circle back to what you just said. Something I heard today from Dennis Fritz. It was kind of shocking, but hi, Diane. So nice to see you.
Hi. You
Good to see you
too.
again,
Sorry, I'm in the car here. I just was directing a rehearsal in the city.
Oh, that's okay. You have a very busy schedule. So you want to just, anyone that doesn't know who you are, introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm an independent candidate running for president. I worked for 32 years with Lyndon LaRouche till he passed away in 2019. I'm a classically trained musician, grew up in a Quaker household in New England, and just decided actually to announce, when I had been thinking about this for some time, about the problem of having a president who is dysfunctional, an opposition which is dysfunctional. I mean, it seems like we went from one senile president to another president suffering various kinds of disorders. And there's no place for an opposition or for actually sane policy, because so many people are against. I mean, that's not hard, right? Whatever you want to be concerned about, whether it's inflation, whether it's the war, whether it's the genocide in Gaza, the police state measures, the lack of free speech, you can go on and on. But how do you solve this? What would a constructive program be like? Can we actually reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act, for example? Can we actually build big infrastructure like we haven't built since Kennedy, pretty much? And who's going to advocate for that? So I thought such a voice was needed and decided to declare my candidacy, and then had an official launch, which Kelly was at on January 10th, with a number of people who, particularly some retired military who don't typically endorse, like Scott Ritter gave the best non-endorsement that I've ever heard. And Colonel Doug McGregor, who also had some words to say there, was connected online. And then a group of farmers and Alaska salmon fishermen and various people. And I think one person said at the end of the meeting, well, instead of, are you actually running as a cabinet? I said, well, that's kind of an interesting idea. Because if the point is policy, why not, in effect, have a cabinet of people, of advisors that I'm working with to see if we can even survive until we get to the 2028 election. So that's what I'm up to and my thoughts about it. And I'm finding a very interesting response, and a massive number of Americans, particularly with what Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson, and Joe Kent have been doing, who maybe had considered themselves Republicans before, but who see the United States, in their view, being hijacked by Israel or other interests other than American. I think there's a great deal of openness, or people who are saying, I talked to a guy today who said basically that I was the only person he voted for when I ran for US Senate against Gillibrand. And I think that's something independents bring to the table. You know, we get accused, oh, you're just splitting the vote. You're going to make. No, we bring voters to vote who would not have voted otherwise. People who don't feel represented.
And we work way harder for those votes than they do, too. Way harder for our votes than the duopoly candidates do. That's for sure.
That's right. That's right. Well, while we're with you, Diane, let's ask you, in the intro clip here, we played a clip of the USS Liberty. And, you know, I think it really, and some people speaking with Ray McGovern, an event, you know, it really plays to the time that we're in right now. Do you see some similarities, and are you, what do you have some predictions, or what do you see coming on the horizon here? Would you put another USS Liberty past this current government that's in place? So where's your heart at, and where's your head at?
Well, I just put out a statement that's been endorsed by several other independent candidates. We're getting it around jointly, asking, would the Epstein class launch another 9/11 as to create a pretext for using a nuclear bomb? Will your neighbor be fooled again? Because, you know, if we are so insane as to send ground troops, they're going to have a lot of Americans getting killed. If the price of gasoline continues to rise, I talked to someone in California today who's a farmer who told me he was paying $7.40 a gallon for diesel. The population will become even more overwhelmingly against this war. So what might be done to corral people into supporting it? And I think there is a big danger of some kind of false flag, something or other, that is a pretext. I'm also very worried because you may remember, and Scott Ritter's reported this on numerous occasions under Biden, when Biden finally relented and allowed Ukraine to use long range and provide guidance for long range strikes into Russia. Scott was told by a congressman, he thought that the people were not being briefed, that Russia had changed their nuclear doctrine, and that their policy was now, if we are attacked by a non-nuclear state, i.e. Ukraine, but which is backed by a nuclear state, i.e. the UK or France or the US, we will use nuclear weapons. Or we might. We're changing our doctrine from no first use to that. So what Scott reported he was told is, they said, oh no, we're briefed that there is now a more than 51% chance of this causing a nuclear war, but that we are prepared for it. So if you have that kind of insanity, or the idea that there's such a thing, and I've heard many people say this with these now, what they call the mini nukes or tactical nukes, that you could use a smaller nuclear weapon and be able to contain the thing. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, right? I don't know what war stays within any particular boundaries anyway, so why you would believe that. But I think it's very, very dangerous. And because the Iranian people, thanks to the assassinations that the Israelis and we have carried out, are much more unified and determined to fight than ever. And this, for them, is existential. So I think we're in a much more dangerous situation than most people realize.
That's true.
I agree.
I want to ask Loren.
The key thing,
I'm
sorry.
No, go ahead.
One quick thing. The key thing I think you said a number of marvelous things are absolutely true, is why would people believe that? And I think one of the things that we're all up against, regardless of which direction we're coming at from the duopoly, is they have found a way to control what people believe. right? And people are so willing to believe lies in the evidence of the truth that's right in front of them that they'd rather believe lies than face the truth and face that they may have been wrong. And so Trump certainly plays on that, but both big parties play on that like crazy. And Diane's struggling with her audio, I think.
Yeah, I think.
I don't know
Can
if
you
she can
hear
us.
Phil?
I can hear.
My sound just kind of disappeared. I don't know why.
Well, it was the most brilliant thing I've ever said, so you missed it, Diane. I'm just teasing. But my point is that people believe, all of us, especially people who are new at running for office or have recently committed to third-party politics or independence, believe that if we tell people the truth, that they will listen and act accordingly. And that is just not proven to be true, sadly. I don't want to be cynical. I'm not the cynic, but that the evidence is there that people would cling to a lie in the same way that an elderly person would rather not tell their kids that they were scammed in some way than to admit that they have. They'd rather, nobody wants other people to see that they've been scammed. And that's where we are with Trump, but that's where we are with the whole duopoly.
Yep.
Why would people believe the lies? I don't know, but they certainly do.
Well, I want to ask Loren, since you're really in the bluest district, do you find there's more interest and appetite for independence? Do you think you can break through that, or what are you dealing with on the ground where you are?
When I knock on a door or meet someone in a park or at a community event, and I give the very straightforward, my name is Loren Colin. I'm the first no party preference independent candidate to ever run for Congress in California 34. And there's a theory to power for independence. And we can talk a little bit more about this. I'm part of a coalition of 20 currently running across the country in the Independent Candidate Network. Yes. When we elect enough independents from across the political spectrum and across the country, representing rural and urban and suburban areas, to deny both Republicans and Democrats a majority in Congress, we get our government back. And then I pause and I say, or for the first time ever, and everyone's faces light up. So, 1 out of every 20 voters in this district is a Republican, and they're like, I don't need to hear anymore. Everybody else, basically like 95% of the voters here are either Democrat or no party preference, lean left independents, right? Mm-hmm. So when I talk to the no party preference people, they're immediately like, I finally have a candidate, right? But the number of Democrats who've been lifelong Democrats who are done with the party, who do know who do know that, again, Jimmy talks out of one side of his mouth and votes another way, who do know that the reason that we have ICE in the streets is because when the Democrats had the opportunity to legalize the 12 million undocumented Americans, they didn't, because they fundraised off it. Mm-hmm. Who understand that the reason gay marriage isn't in legislation is because the courts made it legal, but the court was never enough. And so once the court changed its mind, the Democrats had only ever fundraised off it, right? Mm-hmm. The parties are fundraising machines. When it came to abortion, the same thing. All of the times from 1973 on that the Democrats had the majority, had filibuster-proof majorities in the Senate, and there's always enough Democrats to give the Republicans what they want, right? So we don't have legalized abortion because the Democrats fundraised off it instead of passing on it. Phil, I'm really excited to talk to you more and more, because what you do is you nail the cultural aspect of this. Like, we can talk policy all day long. Voters aren't responding to policy.
I agree, Loren. I agree. And it's to me, and I've been through this, and I've soul searched, and I've suffered through 10 years or so of campaigning. And again, I don't want to sound like the cynic. I'm not, but I think what the real obstacle is people's willingness to hear and respond to the truth, and respond, that change how they vote, change how they view the world. And I think that I know that the oldest tricks that the CIA has done, being involved in media, controlling media, having plants in media, now it's manifested into almost all mainstream media is controlled by the government in some way, shape, or form, either through direct plants or they trade access. Even it started in the first Iraq War, where CNN's coverage of that was sanitized because they were allowed access to be with the troops in Iraq. So that was how it played, and it's even, if you take that example and play it out across all national media now. And that's why people like Tucker and Glenn Greenwald and many other people opt out of that and go on their own. And that's why they're so popular too, is because they're speaking the truth. But that hasn't yet translated into votes. And somehow we have to figure a way, you know, I understand, and people, you all have lived through, or you will live through, people responding to your message. Now, to my message that corresponds to what you've been saying, Loren, is when I first campaigned in 2014 and 2016, I would talk about the non-aggression principle, which libertarians live by, and that is you should be able to do what you want as long as you're not harming, you know, according to your rights, but as long as you're not harming somebody else's right to live their life the way they choose. And people generally like, and I was campaigning in Dane County, like 85% blue, and people are like, oh yeah, I totally agree with that. And then you talk to them about who they're voting for, and it's like they're not listening to themselves.
Right.
It's really, I'm sorry, I could go on, and I
Well,
won't.
no, I
but,
think-
but I think that's important to know when you're setting expectations for your campaigns and seeing exactly what you have to do. And it's not just proclaiming the truth. There's more to it than that. And we need to work together to solve it.
And may I, Kelly, real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I come out of marketing, including direct marketing. And what you're really nailing, Phil, is the psychology of changing one's mind. Mm-hmm. And it is actually the most energy intensive thing a human being can do is change their mind, right? So once you believe a fact or a false fact and a myth, whatever new information that you have to take in, because the first thing you have to do, and you already said it earlier, is you have to admit you're wrong. And the human brain is just not designed in any way, shape, or form to admit that it has taken in wrong information. Once you do that, then you actually have to still do more mental work to clear the field to take in the new information. And then you still have to process that new information and finally reach your new conclusion. And that takes more personal energy than anything that a person does. So because our brains are designed to not waste energy because we still have to just live, right? It's actually designed to not to push away from having to address anything like that. But the way around it, and I think that's kind of the gist of a lot of these conversations, is the way around it is to give somebody a reason for change. So when it comes to marketing, when it comes to anything in life, people don't buy the features. They buy the benefits. They buy the literal personal change to them or that makes their life better. And I think part of the discussion of what I try and weave in at the door in 2 minutes is I'm not just here at the door to tell you we can stop the two parties. I'm here at the door to tell you when we stop the two parties, the person that benefits the most is you, right? Oh, now you want to hear the policy? Cool, we can talk policy. But I've already gotten them to understand that I'm here for them, right? This is nothing to do with me. Mm-hmm. It's all about you, the person.
The case you can make is that and forgive me, the unlikelihood of winning, right? Which is hard to deal with coming from third party or independent. Like, I know that I can win, but I know that I probably won't. Sorry if that's disturbing to anybody, but that's kind of what the odds are setting out, right? So if you know that and you can relay that to the voters, like, hey, I'm not doing this for personal glory because I'm not getting covered. I'm being excluded from debates, whatever it is in your situation. That, they're working against me, and so this is not fun. This is not just raise your hand and they give you money and you're running for office like it is for the duopoly. This is like struggle and changing people's minds. So that's a way to convince them too that you're sincere and that your message is real and I'm not trying to sell them something. But even that is a hard time. We still have to work at that, right? And that's a tall ask for a large. I don't know how many people are in your congressional district, but what millions, right?
Well, 760,000, so it's the same size as any full congressional district.
Right.
But
right.
no one in California 34. No one in California 34 votes. We will be lucky. So we have one of the highest immigrant populations, regardless of their status. They're just not citizens. So we already only have about 530,000 eligible citizens to register. So that's a little smaller than the average, of which only 370,000 are registered, which is already lower than average for a district.
Do you have good messaging in Spanish?
Yeah, I mean, I do. But again, most people here who are Spanish speakers speak English as well.
Yeah.
So again, knocking on doors, I'm most likely having a conversation with someone if they want to speak to me, right?
Awesome.
And the other thing is there's Koreans, there's Bangladeshi, like there's so many languages here that just to say it's Spanish when almost everyone speaks English is not really the thing that holds us back. But what I was going to say is we will be lucky to have 90,000 people vote in the primary. That's all barely 1 out of 6 voters in California 34 or eligible voters will vote in the primary. That's how bad it is.
Yeah, I just had to pull up this cartoon because I think if we could somehow break through, I mean, it speaks for itself. I mean, they just say we don't vote because it won't make a difference. But if they just cut out and did it, game over, right? So
it was one of the best conversations I had in East Los Angeles. I was going door to door in Belvedere Gardens, which is very much an overlooked neighborhood in unincorporated East LA. And I said, hey, hi, I'm Loren, Colin, I'm running. And the gentleman was like, I don't vote. And I said, I totally understand. I wouldn't vote either. I understand that deep skepticism, but I'm here as an independent to give you something to vote for. And then we had a great conversation, and he called me the next day and we had an hour-long conversation. Now it's hard to scale that to the 25 to 30,000 votes I need to come in the top 2 in our open primary, but the potential is there. And I think, again, this is not a tomorrow thing, but if we all commit to keep working at it, we could make this change here in the next very few years.
Well, I'm seeing something that I think is very encouraging, and it's more about the candidates, but I think it reflects just the general thinking, just the general sense in the country. And that is, when I did candidates for Assange, which Phil was part of as well, and Michael Harbaugh and Matt Ho, it was all surrounding First Amendment, First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, and then we got into, of course, Gaza happened, and it was anti-war discussions, and I'm like, there's all this overlap with these candidates, Greens, Libertarians, and Independents. But still, I had to sometimes, I feel like some candidates maybe were concerned about coming on and being seen with other, you had to stay in your camp. But I'm noticing a big difference now. And I know Diane she does some candidate symposiums on Fridays. Is it 7:30? Yeah. It just seems like people are the candidates are setting that aside. So I think that's a really good sign. What do you guys think? Or Todd or Diane?
Yeah, a lot of the people I've talked to, they don't care about politics. It's not part of their lives. I mean, everyone is so ground down right now. It's really about what policy can I do to make your day-to-day life better. It's not even about right or left or any of that crap. People don't have time for that. They just don't anymore, as bad as it's gotten. That's what I've noticed, at least. And did I talk? I don't remember if I mentioned about that psychology, Phil. It's the 5-minute fight and they live. He had to beat his friend's ass to put the glasses on him to make him see, because people don't want to see the truth, even when it's put right in their face. But that had to be a drag out fight, because it had to show how hard it is to get people to accept reality. So that's the fight we're in.
That's the ultimate battle.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are running from the parties, and I think they're just not going to vote. And maybe we can get to them, but also there is a big problem of election fraud. We're allowed to say that now without getting immediately taken off here or sent to jail.
Definitely so, yes.
I mean, I experienced it firsthand in both of my races when I ran against Schumer and then Gillibrand. When I ran against Schumer, it was more obvious because my votes just disappeared. The more votes that came in, the fewer I had. And so election night, I had 57,000, and I don't have any screenshots of that because I didn't expect it to start going down. But when it started going down, we started taking pictures. So it was 54,000, 43,000. By morning, it was 29,000. By the end of the week, after they counted all the votes, it was 25,000. And then I started looking at individual counties, because what I knew from one election group was that in 2020, the state of New York had certified something like 348,000 more votes than voters who voted. That is, if you added up how many people voted by county, you came up with a figure that was 348,000 lower than what the Secretary of State claimed you had. So that was about a 4% margin that was thrown in somewhere. And in my county at the time, Rockland County, I had election night, I had 5.8% of the vote. And there was one poll which mentioned my name, which said I was polling at 5% in the state. So that's where I lived, 5.8%, 6,212 votes. When I woke up the next morning, I had 182 votes. So I went immediately to the Board of Elections to say, can you give me a reverse time-stamped? I wanted to see where the votes started going down. And they had already reverse engineered the whole thing, or whatever they do, so that never at any point. But then when I noticed is what they called the blank vote, which is someone goes in and for some reason allegedly doesn't vote for US Senate.
Mm-hmm.
The blank vote was exactly 6,212. It was what my vote had been the night before. So I discovered 40 counties where my vote was swapped to the precise number with the blank vote. And then they massaged, because we don't have an election day anymore, we have a season. So they keep changing the numbers the farther you get from the election. So by the end of the week, it wasn't the precise number, it was 2 or 3 off. But what it showed was that I probably did actually have about 5% of the vote. They claimed at the end of stealing all my votes, they claimed I had 0.5%. And then this election with Gillibrand, I had people ready. I said, okay, we're all going to take screenshots. So this time they just flatlined it, no matter where the votes were coming from. And if you watch votes coming in, they go up and down, right? The percentages change because they count one particular neighborhood or this, No, my vote, flatline, it was like a dead person, flatline, 0.5%, no matter whose vote was being counted, what part of the state, when it came in. And so then I just decided to go around my neighborhood and knock on doors, because in my election district, they said I had only 5 votes. So a friend and I spent a couple hours and looked up voters who had voted and who were not with the Democrat or Republican Party. In 2 hours, we find 9 people who were willing to sign sworn affidavits that they had voted for me.
Wow.
And that was nothing. I only interviewed about 1/3 of the people. Sorry, 1/10. I mean, no, less than that. 3% of the voters in my district, and I had already found double the number of votes that I had. So it's massive. And I think the election fraud is done for the same reason the media lies. They want people, for example, who don't like the Iran war, even though we are by far the majority of the population, they want people to feel like they're the only one. They want you to feel isolated so that you don't dare to talk about it. And if they can divide you from your neighbor on some other stupid thing like abortion or trans or whatever, they don't care. And then you never get together on the most important matters, which people are quite unified on.
Right.
You
I
hit
think
the
we
nail
have
on
to
the head,
break
Diane.
this stigma. That's another thing, is the election fraud, that it's like, so after 2020, it became very taboo to, if you're on the Dem side, to even say anything about election fraud. And then of course YouTube and everywhere thwarted it. And then after this last one, which we'll not get too into, but there was this big explosion of Democrats claiming election fraud, which partly had to do with Diane's race. But I found
the Democrats were calling it in 2016 too. They were saying election fraud in 2016.
in the primaries, I think. Yeah, no, you're right.
No.
You're
After
right.
the
No, and then
you're right.
they did a recount. Remember, Hillary
Yeah.
demanded a recount, and then they discovered she had even less votes. That was really funny.
Was that Michigan? Was that where that? I think that was Michigan.
Oregon, Washington State, I think, was one of the places. And in Washington State, do you remember the Democratic Party delegates voted, or electors voted for Colin Powell? They were so opposed to Hillary Clinton. It was so funny.
So what do you think, though, I guess I'll say this to Loren and Todd, if you talk to people, if you brought up this topic, what do you think you would hear? Like, that's taboo, or do people have thoughts on it?
Only the most committed politicos would dare talk about election fraud. So for the average voter, the median voter, it's just not a thing. And I think it would actually be a turnoff. I actually agree with what Todd said. Obviously, there's a difference of, the operation of an election and what we're dealing with as far as how votes are tabulated versus running the election. I agree with Todd that at the door, people don't want esoteric. At this point, they feel the house is on fire, they are being singed and burned, and they just want to know what you might be able to do to help them today. And part of that message, honestly, as an independent, is I can't do it alone, right? Like, you have to participate. I'm not a savior. Independents are not saviors. We're options to get you involved, to wonder and go down to the registrar recorder and demand to know what the actual count is, right? If that's something that interests you, you have to pick it up. I can't pick up everything, right? I have an election to run. But if you are concerned about it, then do it. It's also sometimes very strange, right? Because you'll get into conversations with someone when it does happen, and it's like, oh, it's all rigged. Well, was it rigged when your person won? Well, no, it wasn't rigged. Was it rigged when your person lost? Well, then that was rigged. There's no, sorry, Diane, and I absolutely understand where you're coming from, but until you pry open those boxes and we count them, right? That's the evidence, right? So how then do we make elections open and free where we all get to just count them? That could be something that we push for. What I do think people are ready for, though, and it's a big conversation right here in California right now because everyone's afraid of our open top two system in the primary right now. This happens every 4 years. Don't worry, neither of the Republicans have topped out. They're not going to advance. But again, what I would love to see, and I don't talk about this at the door too often, because again, it kind of gets granular and it doesn't necessarily affect people's lives. But I would love for people to see how, if we had a voting rights movement and a ballot access movement, how we could fundamentally change this country. And back to Kelly, to that cartoon you showed, that's how we get people to be involved when they feel that they can access the system, right? So that makes it the debate right now about the SAVE Act, should there be a voter ID? Well, yes, there should be a national voter ID that is free, that the government forces into every citizen's hand. Here's your national voter ID, citizen. It's yours forever, and it's good in every single election. Things like taking what California does really well, open nonpartisan primaries, and improving it with ranked choice voting or star voting, and choosing the top 3 or 4 who go to the general, right? That way, so in 2011, California basically took the parties out of the electoral process. In New York State, and in Louisiana, and in Georgia, and in North Carolina, the two parties literally run the electoral process to everyone else's detriment, unless you're in the duopoly, right? So if we could have the electoral reform to make voting easy and automatic, and have ballot access be nonpartisan and easy, I think that's the structural change that we need to get to. And then make sure that every vote counts, right? So I think, again, it's sort of people believing these myths, and we have to get them past the myths to understand how we can make things that actually benefit them.
We just had a comment in the chat here. I thought I'd pull it up here. Hopefully you can read it. She says, why do we need additional ID? We already have ID. Even if we don't drive, we carry official ID from the DMV.
Because it's a deeper idea. In 2026, we have lots of technology, and we should use that technology. And a national voter ID really is saying there's a database of voters. And so you're just think of it more like a social security number, but a voter ID number that is transferable from state to state and district to district. And if you have your one national voter ID and you move states, and as long as you establish residency, we'll say 30 days before the primary election starts, then you've established that residency and you can use that to vote. You can't use it to vote twice, because then the database will go, hey, this ID has been used twice. Something's wrong, right? And the fraud, which again, there almost is never any fraud in voting. At the actual, again, maybe the counting, there's fraud. in the casting of votes, there's
Right.
almost no fraud. So that's why. So, and also not everybody has an ID or a license. A driver's license isn't free. There's not
And
one
just
single
to be
state.
clear, you mean
There's
the
not-
individual voter. There's not like people voting twice and that kind of stuff is really not existent. But
I mean, if the Heritage Foundation says that there's been 47 known cases of voter fraud in 40 years, and if anyone's going to say that there's more and that's all they can come up with, like, I'm actually going to believe it's 0.000000025%.
Plus,
That's so
if
many-
you attribute intelligence to these people who are trying to manipulate elections, which they may be evil, but they're intelligent. That's the least efficient way to affect an election is to find
Right.
individuals to go vote fraudulently when they can
Right.
just change the numbers, or suppress in whatever way. That's the worst possible way to do it. So of course they don't. Why would they do that?
Well, they have the machine under control. They don't need voter suppression. Both parties are the same,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't matter. If they only give a platform to the two parties, then you're going to get one of those two parties, and they're functionally the same. So they don't even have to suppress the vote. They don't need voter fraud.
Well, they suppress it in other ways, though, too.
Yeah,
One of the things, like
saying,
when Loren talked about was of all the structural ways where, like the ballot access, etc. But so many people, and you'll discover this after you run, if you start commenting on the person, if you don't get elected and you're commenting on social media or whatever about the person that did get elected, you'll have people tell you that voted, like, well, you should have ran. And it's the most infuriating thing in the world to tell them, I did run, I ran, I was on the ballot, but so part of it too is, and I'm not in favor of mandating, people need to be aware through media who they can vote for too, not just on the ballot. When they get to the ballot, when they're casting the ballot, it's too late. It's too late. They've already made up their mind and they're not paying attention. They've decided, they've been persuaded, they've been propagandized. We need a way to connect with voters way ahead of time on a level platform with the duopoly candidates so that we can be seen as viable. And if not, then the rest of it isn't going to count for as much as we hope it does.
I want to really agree with that. They being excluded from the debate, it's not even about winning. This is how they make sure that the quote unquote representatives, for example, the Congress, never have to hear anything from their constituents. If the one candidate who supports universal health care is not allowed in the debate, then the two other candidates never have to deal with that matter. So I think opening up the debates is really urgent. I also think, and probably everyone here agrees, that we should get rid of Citizens United, which is a giant fraud. And I think there should be equal time that the media should be forced that if someone is on the ballot, and then we have to level the playing field on ballot access. You can't have the independent have to get 10 times, I think in 4 states that I was looking at, the number of signatures the independent has to get is literally 10 times what you have to get if you're with the party. In New York, it's only 3 times, but New York only gives you 6 weeks. So that is the challenge there. And voters are not aware of this. I spoke with Judge Napolitano at an event somewhere, and I said, can't you scandalize ballot access? Don't you think it would be a service to your audience for them to know that many people who are qualified that they would like to hear from cannot even get on the ballot? So in that sense, you could say the election is stolen, and it has nothing to do with the vote. It has to do with the powers that be excluding voices from the entire process.
That's what my answer when people ask me about voter fraud or rigged elections. I'm like, they're all rigged. They're all designed so that you don't hear from people that are qualified and that could represent you. You're only hearing by design from start to finish, from the beginning of the campaign, everything that's, by whether it's by money or access or by broadcasters colluding, which is the case in Wisconsin. You're only hearing from the people that they want you to hear from. And so how can you choose? Unless you're the kind of person that will dig or is already committed to a Green Party or Libertarian Party, whatever, then you know what's going on. But 90% of voters aren't digging. They're waiting to be spoon-fed information, and we're not part of that information by design.
You nailed it, Phil. It's a personal struggle I have, but again, also accept and understand the world that we live in. Like, if anyone takes 2 seconds to just type in, California 34 candidate, my SEO is the best. I come up ahead of Jimmy Gomez. Right? Like,
Oh,
you can't beat that. But I also know that no voter, or very few voters, anytime before the election are going to go to Google and type in California 34 candidate and do that research. They're waiting for me to somehow magically appear in front of them. And Diane, like you said, that's either because someone gives you a pedestal to stand on and you're using their time, or because we have to raise money. Now, yes, Citizens United is horrible and we need to take away corporate personhood when it comes to our elections. But I also don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with independents having to raise money to get that access. So that's part of what Independent Candidate Network is. It's also a PAC to raise money for independent candidates. And I know as someone who's been out there grinding, trying to raise money, how hard it is, because people, again, yes, Kelly, they're like, that's awesome. You're running as an independent. I love that. Will you give me money? No, you guys haven't won anything yet. So why would I give you money? Because you haven't proven the model.
Exactly.
Like, well, so
if you're running as a D or an R, you're already bought and paid for, and the money has a. They know who they're paying for. They're paying for a loyal imperial soldier dressed in the whole white outfit, carrying the little laser gun, and they know they can trust you, so they give you money. It filters down through the PACs and through the party. If you're a wild card, then you're not getting that money, and that automatically is an unlevel playing.
Well, actually, if I could interject, Loren and Diane certainly knows about this, running her incredible, collected, I believe, 70,000 signatures to get on the ballot in the Senate, like absolutely insane grassroots. But this is what I was going to say is, as an independent candidate, as candidates, when you ask that question, that challenge that you run into, will you donate to my campaign? Well, no, you don't have a chance or whatever. I think it's so important as an independent candidate is you can say your money, we can give you something. And if you care about politics. And so anyway, having an active grassroots campaign where you're registering people to vote, doing voter education, maybe running mutual aid hubs, helping your community in some way and platforming voices and groups in the community, doing good work, leading and doing community service projects and stuff like that. And so that is a way to fundraise and to show people like you will get something for this, win, lose, or draw, like our campaign is doing work. And that's something that I try to bring up to all the candidates on here.
Yeah, but there's still a difference of I am fundraising and I get some, and I'll be reporting again in 5 days or 4 days, whatever, right? And you'll all be able to see it. And I'm not ashamed of it, but my Democratic candidates who are running against the incumbent both have, or one of them got picked up by a very progressive Democratic group that doesn't like Jimmy. So by them picking her, it just opened up their spigot of money, right? Mm-hmm. She's not a good campaigner. She's not, and again, whatever. I don't want to besmirch, but she's.
But what I have another idea,
which not a great
is
campaigner, but she certainly is not a great fundraiser. Yeah. But they opened up the fundraising to her, and I'm not upset by it. I'm saying we have to figure out in really smart new ways how to earn that money by demonstrating we are competent, we can win, and what that change will be to people. And it doesn't take a lot of us. It's going to take 1, 2, 3 a cycle and keep growing it, but it has to start somewhere.
I just want to, I think there should be spending limits, which will much more level the playing field. And, with the FEC, there's this giant loophole. I don't happen to be a billionaire or even a millionaire. So the FEC says no one can give over $3,500 in an election cycle, but the candidate may spend unlimited amounts of their own money. So that means automatically it's an aristocracy, because if you happen to have tens of millions of dollars, you can spend that on your campaign with no restriction whatsoever. If you don't happen to have that, oh, well, too bad, you're under the limit. And I think Americans also are not aware of that, but that is why it is somewhat of an aristocracy about who can even afford to run.
What really shocks me, speaking of the FEC, is the labyrinth of laughability of what it means to have a PAC or a super PAC and who can talk to who, when then the president goes and raises money for his own PAC that literally goes into his own pocket. I'm like, this is literally what the FEC says you cannot do. And he's up there doing it in everybody's faces. and I can't do it because they'll come after me.
Right.
Right. It's just, and I'm waiting, like, where's that lawsuit? Right. To me, honestly, all of these FEC rules need to go. Like, in fact, I mean, it's a local thing, but what Jimmy Gomez did before he left the state assembly or state senate 9 years ago was he basically left California with this super convoluted reporting structure that was supposed to be more transparent, but it was only more transparent if you could afford to pay for the consultants to make sure that you filed properly, right? It was just another way to make sure only wealthy Democrats and wealthy Republicans backed by real money could run. Because if not, it's nearly impossible. Honestly, it's easier to run a national campaign and do the FEC file than it is, because it's really basically money in, money out, than it is what you have to do to run in the state of California for a state office or in the city of LA for a city office. It's these reporting things that are supposed to be transparent that are, to your point, Phil, just another way to lock you out.
Yeah.
Yes. You know about the matching funds in New York? I think this is one of the most scandalous things. And this was the reason Cuomo gave for tripling the signature requirement for independents, even though if you're running for federal office, you don't get state matching funds. But they tripled the signatures because they didn't want, quote, frivolous candidates. And they used that word. In these municipal elections, the matching funds, the first $250 is matched 8-1. And a friend of mine talked to a guy who's running for now assembly. He had run for Congress. And I guess for his race, somehow he was getting 12-1, which is absolutely insane. And this is why, by the way, it's very common. I had to stop people from doing this with organizations. I had to say, I'm not taking your money, because they come and they want to give you cash, and they fill out the donation forms for 10 people, making it $100 each. So they didn't know that I don't get federal funds, and that I also, because of the scrutiny I'm under, do not do anything that is not totally by the books. So they came to me with forms claiming 10 people had each given $100. Give me the cash. I said, no, they thought that would be $800 each for me. But when you see Adams, right, getting caught because some guy was siphoning cash to his employees so they could each give and then you'd get eightfold. I mean, it's really unbelievable. It is so corrupt. And it's led to a whole class of opportunists, of people who only look for the money because the candidates are getting so much money in local office. And that was something else I learned. I went and spoke at I forget, some event, and a young man comes up, oh, I can make your, I'll do a bunch of graphics for you. And I thought he liked my campaign, naive me. I thought he liked my campaign and he was going to do the graphics. So I said, well, okay, why don't you do this? And then he sends me a bill for $200. And I just thought, oh my gosh, it's so bad. You lose the principle, you lose the passion of fighting for an idea or for an issue or something you want addressed. Everything becomes degraded. And I think that's another thing that drives people out of it.
In Wisconsin, there are currently lawsuits, and I don't know if this term is familiar with you guys in different states, but it's called smurfing, I guess. I don't know why it's called that. But donations are made on behalf of people that aren't aware that they're making donations. So the major parties look up people, and they have access to the information that it takes to make a donation, which is they have name, address, occupation, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They send a donation to a candidate or to a party. And these people that are living in nursing homes or wherever they're living aren't aware that they're making donations. It's just being done in their name. So at the end, the paperwork looks great. If the state organization or the FEC or whoever's scrutinizing it, it looks fine, because they're not going back and asking people, did you actually make this donation? But there's a group in Wisconsin called Hot Government that's anti this sort of corruption. And they started asking people and found that happens a lot with Republicans and Democrats, this smurfing. And so they're filing lawsuits in state court and finding it very difficult, of course, because everyone's working together on this thing, and all the state court, the judges, et cetera, are all appointed by Republicans and Democrats. But that's how far they will go to try and clean their money, is to give money on behalf of people that aren't even aware of it or aren't even necessarily legally competent to make a donation.
I think as bad as super PACs and dark money is, and it's awful, and again, like we all agree, get rid of it. The craziest of crazy PACs is, have you guys heard of the leadership PACs, right? If you're a member of the House or the Senate, you can set up a leadership PAC. which can take, your campaign can only take $3,500 per person, right? But your leadership PAC can take unlimited money. Now, your leadership PAC can't give to your campaign, but your leadership PAC that took unlimited money can give unlimited money to your friend's campaign, who can turn around and take their unlimited money and give it to you. And
that's all perfectly legal.
These rules?
That's
in the
how
code.
leadership is chosen. That's how they choose leaders.
I think
that's
we
all
need
in
a
the
lot
code. It's crazy.
And that's
Set
what
up a PAC, you know, and when you're setting up one that's associated with you're exactly right, Loren. It seems like the crookedest thing ever, yet it's baked right into like the first hurdles, the first decisions you make when setting up a campaign and a PAC are those. That's what they are. What do you want? Of course, if you're trying to win and trying to take money, and you have a leadership PAC, and every single federal candidate has one. Every single one. Well, at least the Democrats and Republicans do. Because
Diane said she had to jump off, but she thought it was a great conversation. Please tell everybody I was really happy to join them. And see, I think that's what, you know, in doing this, aside from learning all the things that can go wrong from Phil, no, I'm just kidding. You know, the conversations, I'm just joking. It's useful. I mean, we have to address those things. If you're a new candidate and you don't know this could happen, it's useful information. But you know, what we've been doing and what Diane is doing on Friday nights, or any candidate could go anywhere and start, you know, the Independent Candidate Network and have these conversations online. We may not be getting a ton of views, but I think over time, when people start hearing, we're talking about things that you won't hear at all on the mainstream media, because they control it. They control the narrative, they control the voting, they control everything. But I think it's just got to be, it's building momentum and has power in numbers. But why don't we go around, we'll let everybody say wrap it up. And and on that note though, I think, you know, if you're interested in coming back, like Todd, this is your second time on, we love the conversations, and that's what's important, at least for what we're doing right here now. Oh, I'm sorry, one other thing. And about the election integrity security stuff, I hear you, Loren. I think that people don't care about it until their candidate loses and they see something or something seems funny. But it's important that as candidates that they are aware, like Diane has experienced. So I have been hosting election security meetings every Tuesday at 8, and we are very, you know, it's nonpartisan, which is very needed. And we just try to stick to the facts. We have some IT security computer people that join. And so maybe it's not something you're interested in right now, but it might become something that you're interested in later. And the truth is, we don't know what happens in our elections because it's a black box. And that's not being conspiracy, you know, a conspiracy theorist. But okay, so I'll toss it. Okay, Todd?
Yeah, like I said, just to close out, and I appreciate you guys inviting me again. That money it's a disease in our political system, and like I was saying, leadership is chosen by who can bundle the most money and who can buy votes in their caucus. And like we talked about last week, they will eat their own. That's why the parties aren't safe. If you want someone who's going to be able to think outside the box and actually fight for you, the parties are not a safe place to be. Look at what the parties have done to their own. And it's happened over and over. So we need to have more of these. We need to work harder together. And Loren, I didn't realize that you were with, is it Paul Burton? I spoke to him last year, and unfortunately I wasn't able to come to your conference, but I'd love to reach back out to you guys and get in touch. I just wasn't able to make that conference. But yeah, we need to work together. We need to work together and put some glasses on the country so they can see what's going on. I mean, it's just we need to force the glasses onto people, like just like that fight scene. I love that movie. All right, that's all I've got.
Okay, Loren.
And then I'll extend your metaphor, Todd. After they have the glasses, what independents are doing, and what everyone that you host, Kelly, on your show, and Phil and Michael, is we're the option, right? So now that you can see, it's one thing if you just put your glasses on and all you saw was the same two Coke and Pepsi again, right? But we're actually, you know, a cool, crisp glass of sparkling water, Independence, in front of you. Or maybe I saw something more brown in Phil's hand earlier. I don't know. I don't know if I saw that. Yeah, there you go. It's a good drink. It's a good drink. But we are that option. And that's what I think I'm most proud of this cycle. When I started and was very lonely, and then finding out pretty quickly that we're not alone, but then actually, you know, taking that next step with people like Paul to then actually start to pull independents together. So I'm going to do 2 plugs. The first one is for me. So you can learn more about my campaign at Loren Colin for Congress, LOREN for Congress. That's my handle on every social media platform you could dream of. And if you could dream of that social media platform, I'm on it. And then the other is for Independent Candidate Network. So you can go to independentcandidatenetwork.com and you can start to learn. Again, we're already at 20 candidates who are running either in the primaries now or going straight to the general election. Yep. Our goal is to have 50 candidates by the time we get to the general in November 3rd. And what people will learn is there's a theory to power for independence, right? Again, if we were one off and we were an island, I would agree with that cynicism. Like, what are you going to do? But it's not what I'm going to do. It's not what Todd's going to do. It's what we're going to do together. When we elect enough independents to stop both parties from a majority in the House of Representatives, that is the clear first step to breaking the two-power party duopoly, ending the two-party system, and getting our government back. And every day we are working to show the American people, and to Phil's earlier point, whatever we can do to just get out in front of them, because we have to do that. We have to get in front of them. That's what we're doing, and we'd love your support however you can support us.
Awesome. That's a great wrap up, I think. So cool. Thank you guys so much.
Appreciate the platform. Thanks, everyone.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Have a good night, guys.